Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I never thought I'd say these words out loud. Not to the world, not even to myself. But here I am, standing on the edge of something that feels both terrifying and right. After years of believing my home would always be Korea, that everything I loved, built, and protected belonged here, I've made a decision that changed everything. I told Jimin that after I get married, I might leave Korea. And he cried. Not because he was angry, not because he didn't understand, but because for the first time, he realized I was serious about choosing a life that might take me away from everything we've known. For a long time, I thought success meant staying where I started. BTS began here. Our story, our pain, our dreams, all of it was written in this country. The stages, the sweat, the laughter that filled empty halls before anyone cared who we were. Every city, every night on tour, every meal shared in silence after exhaustion, it all tied me to this place. But as time went on, I began to feel something else. A quiet pull, a whisper that said maybe home wasn't just one place. Maybe home could be wherever I was becoming someone new. I remember the day I told them. It was after rehearsal, one of those nights, when the lights in the studio were dim and everyone looked a little older than before. We'd finished dancing for hours, our shirts soaked, our voices fading. Taehyung was sprawled on the couch. Suga was tuning something on his laptop. Namjoon had his notebook open, writing something no one would ever see. Jimin sat next to me, tired but smiling the way he always does when he doesn't want people to know he's worried. I said it softly. After I get married, I might move abroad for a while. The room went quiet. Even the sound of the air conditioner felt too loud. Jimin looked at me, waiting for me to laugh, but I didn't. His smile faltered. He asked, "Are you serious?" And I nodded. That's when his eyes started to glisten. He didn't shout or try to convince me otherwise. He just whispered, "You're really going to leave, aren't you?" That moment broke something in me, because I realized it wasn't just about distance. It was about everything that distance means. The end of a shared era. The closing of a chapter we never thought would end. You see, I've always been afraid of stillness, of what happens when the world stops cheering, when the lights fade, when I'm just a person again. For years, the stage was my heartbeat, the fans were my air, and the members were my family. We've seen each other at our best and at our worst, our laughter and our silence, our victories and our shame. There were nights Jimin stayed with me when I couldn't sleep, nights when Taehyung's jokes were the only thing holding the group together, nights when Namjoon's words reminded us why we started. And now, suddenly, I'm the one saying I might leave that behind. It's not about running away. It's about finding peace, a different kind of success. I met someone who made me see life outside of the cameras, the noise, the constant expectation to be perfect. She's not from this world of fame. She doesn't care about chart numbers or headlines. She cares about people, about meaning, about simple days that aren't planned by a schedule. When she talks about life, she doesn't use the word someday. She uses today. She doesn't talk about achievement, she talks about character. And I realized I spent so many years becoming good at everything except being still. There's something about her that reminds me of what we used to be before all of this. Before fame made every decision feel like a performance. She once said something that stayed in my heart. Practice being the person you hope to become. That line felt like lightning in my chest. It reminded me of the first time I watched Jimin practice alone after midnight, perfecting one move for hours until his body shook from exhaustion. That's what love feels like to me now. It's not a performance, it's a daily practice. When I told Jimin about her, he didn't say much at first, he just listened. He's always been like that quiet empathy, the kind that doesn't need to fill silence with words. Then he asked one question that pierced through everything. Do you love her enough to let go of who you were? That's the hardest question I've ever been asked. Because love, I'm realizing, isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your world. It's about allowing yourself to build a new one. After that conversation, I couldn't sleep for nights. Every corner of my room felt heavy with memories, laughter echoing through practice rooms, Taeyoung's voice calling my name across a sea of lights, the sound of army singing louder than us. I kept asking myself, how do you leave something that gave you everything? How do you say goodbye to a home that raised you, even when that home no longer feels big enough for who you're becoming? Namjoon once told me, the hardest part of growing up is realizing you can't stay in the same place and still become who you're meant to be. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Leaving Korea isn't about rejecting it. It's about carrying its lessons with me, about living what we always preach, courage, authenticity, evolution. It's about practicing the values that built BTS in the first place, but in a new chapter of my life. Yoongi understood it faster than anyone. He's always been like that quiet, but seeing everything, he said, if you find peace, that's worth more than applause. And that line stayed with me because he's right. There's a kind of applause that comes from the crowd and another that comes from within. I think I've been chasing the wrong one for too long. Sometimes I imagine what it will be like living somewhere far away, maybe America, maybe somewhere quieter, waking up without cameras, without makeup, without pressure. Just me and her, maybe walking down a quiet street, holding hands without fear of being followed. It sounds simple, maybe even ordinary, but for me, that's the dream. A life that doesn't need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. But I also know leaving will hurt. I know it already has. I can still see the way Jimin's eyes looked that night. It wasn't anger, it was grief. The kind that comes when someone you love outgrows the place you met them. And maybe that's what real friendship is, loving someone enough to let them go. To trust that even if miles separate you, the bond remains untouched. I told him, you'll always be part of my story, no matter where I go. He nodded, but his eyes said, what words couldn't, that some chapters are too sacred to be rewritten. Taeyoung joked that he'd visit me every month, but I could see the worry behind his smile. Hoseok said he was proud of me for being brave enough to live differently. Jinhyung just smiled the way only he can. The kind of smile that says he's seen enough of life to know that change isn't the enemy, it's proof that we're still alive. I think that's the lesson I've been learning all along. That love, real love, doesn't ask you to stay the same. It asks you to grow, to risk, to evolve. It asks you to build a life that aligns with your truest values, not just your biggest fears. And sometimes that means leaving. Sometimes it means walking away from applause to find silence. Sometimes it means saying goodbye, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started listening to what your heart was trying to tell you. Jimin once told me, you always run toward the next thing. Maybe this time, let love be the thing that runs toward you. That's what I'm doing. For the first time, I'm not chasing, I'm allowing. Allowing life to unfold, allowing love to guide me, allowing change to shape me. I'm not leaving Korea because I'm done with it. I'm leaving because it taught me how to begin again. And maybe that's what all of this is about, beginnings disguised as endings. The courage to let go of what's familiar, to step into the unknown with faith that you're not losing your story, just rewriting it. So if you've ever been afraid to move on, to leave the place that defined you, to love in a way that feels too risky, I want you to know it's okay. Because the truth is, you can't outgrow love. You can only learn to love in bigger spaces. Jimin cried when I told him I leave Korea after marriage. But maybe those tears weren't just sadness. Maybe they were blessings, a silent promise that no matter where I go, a part of me will always belong to this brotherhood, this music, this country, this love. And maybe that's what home really is, not a place, but the people who taught you who you are before the world told you who to be. When the news started to spread among those closest to us, I realized how heavy silence can feel when everyone is trying to be strong for you. The next morning, after that conversation with Jimin, I went for a long walk before sunrise. Seoul was quiet, that kind of quiet, that only happens before the city wakes up. I passed by the Han River, the place where I used to run when I needed to clear my mind during trainee days. Back then, the only thing I wanted was to be seen, to prove myself, to make something that would last. But that morning, as the first light hit the water, all I wanted was peace. Not applause, not recognition, just peace. I thought about how many years I spent chasing the next thing. Every concert, every album, every interview, the world kept giving us more love, more pressure, more responsibility, and I kept saying yes, believing that being needed was the same as being fulfilled. But lately, I've begun to see the difference. There's a kind of loneliness that hides inside success. You can stand in front of thousands of people, hear them chanting your name, and still feel unseen. You can be surrounded by noise and still feel like your heart is whispering into an empty room. That was me. Until she came into my life. She wasn't part of this industry. She didn't grow up watching stages or chasing fame. She lived simply, quietly, with a way of looking at life that made even small moments feel sacred. When we first met, it wasn't during an event or a shoot. It was something ordinary, a charity visit I joined quietly one weekend. She was helping out there too, organizing boxes of donations for children. I didn't expect to talk much, but when she asked me why I was there, I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say to help, but it felt like a lie. Deep down, I knew I was there because I was searching for something real. She smiled when I told her that. She said, then maybe that's what helping really is, showing up when you don't know what you need. That line stayed with me because for years, I thought strength meant knowing all the answers. But maybe strength is also the willingness to show up lost and still care. She had that kind of wisdom that didn't need to be loud. It reminded me of how Namjoon talks about nature, how he says, even silence can be music if you learn to listen. She had that same quiet understanding. As weeks passed, I found myself going back there again and again. At first, I told myself it was for the cause. But deep down, I knew it was for her. She wasn't impressed by who I was. She didn't ask about BTS or concerts or fame. She just talked about people, dreams, and kindness, the kind that doesn't post itself online. She once told me, love isn't found in big moments. It's practiced in small ones. It sounded simple, but it hit me hard. Because that's how I was trained to chase big moments. The world clapped for our milestones, not our daily kindness. That's when I realized something was shifting inside me. I wasn't falling in love with her image or her story. I was falling in love with her way of being, her calm, her integrity, her depth, the way she noticed small things about others, the way she treated everyone the same, no matter who they were. She reminded me of Jimin in that sense, how he always remembers when someone's hurting even when they don't say it. It's that kind of attention that makes people feel seen. Taeyoung noticed the change first. He came to my place one night and said, "You've been smiling differently lately." I laughed, but he was right. Something in me had softened. Suga teased me about it too, said I was finally turning into a romantic. But Namjoon just nodded and said, maybe you're finally learning to live for yourself, not for your image. And I think that's true. For so long, I thought my identity was the group, the fame, the name Jungkook of BTS. But this new feeling made me realize there's a person underneath all that. A version of me who just wants to love honestly and quietly without cameras watching. I remember the day I told her about my dream to move abroad one day, maybe after marriage, maybe when things slow down. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't ask where or why. She just said, "Then promise me you'll bring your roots with you." That line felt like a blessing because she understood what even I was struggling to articulate, that leaving doesn't mean abandoning. It means carrying what shaped you into something new. Still, when I told the members about her and about the possibility of moving away someday, it hit differently. Each of them had a unique reaction. Jin smiled first, like an older brother, proud but nostalgic. Jose clapped and said, You deserve happiness, no matter where it takes you. Namjoon was quiet, reflective, as if trying to calculate what this meant for all of us. Yoongi just said, "Make sure it's real." Taehyung grinned, but his eyes softened, and he muttered, "You're growing up too fast." But Jimin didn't speak at all. He just nodded and looked down. That silence said more than words. We've shared so many stages, so many sleepless nights, so many inside jokes that only we'd understand. He knows me better than most people ever will. That's why his silence felt so heavy, because he knew maybe better than I did that this wasn't just about love. It was about change, about distance, about letting go. Later that night, he came to my room. He sat on the floor beside my bed like he used to during our trainee days when we were both too tired to talk. Then he said quietly, "If you're really leaving one day, promise me you'll still sing for us sometimes." That broke me, because behind that simple sentence was everything: the fear of losing someone, the wish to stay connected, the kind of love that friendship never needs to explain. I nodded. I told him, "I'll always sing for you, for us." Since that night, I've thought a lot about what home means. Is it a place, a person, a feeling? Maybe it's all three. Maybe home is wherever love and purpose meet. And if that's true, then Korea will always be my first home. But maybe it's okay to build another one too, a home that reflects the person I'm becoming, not just the one I was. When I walk through Seoul now, I notice details. I used to ignore the smell of street food, the laughter of strangers, the sound of rain on Han River bridges. These moments feel like goodbyes, but also thank yous. I'm not running from here. I'm simply growing beyond the borders that once defined me. Some people might not understand why I'd ever want to leave. They'll say, I have everything here: fame, friends, family, love, but they don't see the quiet longing inside, the need to breathe differently, to find meaning outside the noise. I'm not leaving because I'm lost. I'm leaving because I'm finally found. And maybe that's what love does. It doesn't make you escape your life. It helps you build a new one, slowly, deliberately, one honest day at a time. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt torn between where you were and who you're becoming, I want you to know it's okay. It's okay to outgrow familiar places. It's okay to chase peace, even if it looks like distance. Sometimes love asks you to stay, and sometimes it asks you to fly. Both can be beautiful. I don't know what the future holds yet, but I know this: when I leave, it won't be because I stopped loving Korea or BTS or Jimin or any of them. It'll be because they taught me how to love courageously enough to live truthfully, even when it means walking alone for a while. And maybe, just maybe, that's what growing up really means. The night before our final rehearsal for an upcoming event, I found myself alone in the studio again. Everyone had already gone home, and the lights above the mirrors flickered softly, making the room feel alive in its own way. I played one of our old songs, not for nostalgia, but to remember where I came from. My reflection in the mirror looked older now, not just in my face, but in my eyes. There's a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from work. It comes from holding things inside too long. That night, I wasn't Jungkook from BTS. I was just a man standing in the middle of everything he'd built, wondering what it would mean to start over somewhere else. When I told Jimin I was serious about moving after marriage, something in his face shifted. It wasn't anger, it was disbelief mixed with quiet understanding. We've been through too many changes together to pretend that time doesn't alter people. We used to talk about growing old together, performing until our hair turned gray. But dreams evolve, and sometimes they don't evolve in sync. I tried to explain that it wasn't about leaving them. It was about finding something I couldn't find here anymore. Stillness, simplicity, peace. But how do you explain peace to someone who has always found meaning in motion? Later, Jimin texted me a voice note. I still haven't deleted it. His voice cracked a little when he said, "I just hope wherever you go, you don't forget that we're still your home." It was the kind of message that feels like a blessing and a wound at the same time. I listened to it over and over that night. The studio echoed with silence, and I sat there until dawn, realizing that sometimes love doesn't stop you from leaving, it gives you the courage to go. The next day, Namjoon came to see me. He's always the one who turns emotions into words when the rest of us can't. He brought coffee black for him, too sweet for me, and said, "Every chapter in our story ends differently, Jungkook. What matters is that we keep reading, not where we're reading from." He has this way of making everything sound like it was always meant to be. But when he left, I noticed he'd written something on the coffee cup sleeve. "Wherever you go, bring your rhythm with you." That line stayed with me. Rhythm, the one thing that connects every part of my life. Even if I leave Korea, even if the language around me changes, rhythm is still home. Maybe that's what I've been searching for all along, a way to carry home with me instead of being trapped by it. I told her about Jimin's tears and Namjoon's advice. She listened quietly, the way she always does, and then said something that pierced right through my hesitation. Love doesn't replace what you're leaving. It teaches you how to carry it differently. I'd never thought of it that way before. Maybe I wasn't choosing between Korea and her. Maybe I was learning how to weave both into a life that was finally balanced. A few days later, I met with Taehyung. He's always the unpredictable one. Sometimes profound, sometimes joking, often both at the same time. We sat on a rooftop with late night snacks and no cameras. Just two friends under the same sky we grew up staring at. I told him I was scared of how people would react, scared of disappointing fans, scared of losing touch with the boys who made me who I am. He looked at me and said, "We all have to go somewhere new to find out if we still belong." Then he smiled and added, "Just don't forget to send postcards." That made me laugh, but there was truth under his humor. Yoongi didn't say much about it either. He never does. But he sent me a song draft the next day. No message, no title, just piano and silence, like a wordless blessing. I listened to it while driving one night, and halfway through, it hit me. The melody wasn't sad or happy. It was acceptance. That's what I wanted to learn, how to accept that. Leaving isn't betrayal, it's evolution. The group chat that night was chaos, like always. Jin Hyung sent memes about me starting a new life as a farmer in Texas. Hoseok spammed heart emojis. Taehyung asked if I'd need him to decorate my future home, and Jimin didn't type anything at all. But then, after everyone else had gone quiet, a single message popped up from him. "Promise me that when you build your new home, there's a space for us too." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "There will always be." Sometimes I wonder what ARMY will think when they hear about this. I know some will be sad, some will feel betrayed, some will say I changed. But maybe they need to know this isn't about leaving them. It's about becoming the kind of person who can love them honestly. For years, I've been giving everything to the music, to the world, to expectations. But I haven't given enough to myself. And if I want to keep giving truth through my art, I need to live truthfully too. I've learned something from all of this. Life doesn't always give you clean choices. Sometimes it gives you crossroads where every direction hurts a little. But the right one is always the one that brings peace, not applause. That's what I'm chasing now. Not fame, not escape, but peace. When I look back at the last decade, it feels like a movie. Our laughter, our exhaustion, the tears nobody saw. We were just kids who dared to dream too big. And somehow that dream carried us farther than we could have imagined. I owe everything to those years, every bruise, every song, every friendship. But as I stand here now, I know the story isn't over. It's just changing languages. I'll never forget Jimin's tears, because those tears meant love, the kind of love that isn't afraid to break, the kind that lets you go so you can find what's next. I think that's what family is, not the people who keep you from changing, but the ones who love you even when you do. As I prepare for what's ahead, I'm learning to let my heart make peace with both joy and grief. Because every goodbye in life is just a different kind of hello waiting to happen. Wherever I go, whoever I become, one truth remains unchanged. BTS isn't just 7 people. It's every version of us that existed. The ones laughing, crying, dreaming, and that will always live inside me. And maybe that's the real lesson behind all of this. You don't lose your home when you leave it. You carry it in your voice, your heart, your memories. In every song, every word, every breath that still reaches the ones who loved you first. I woke up one morning to rain tapping against the window of my apartment, soft, rhythmic, almost like it was trying to say something. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city blur into a watercolor of silver and gray. That kind of morning always makes me reflective. It reminds me that time never really stops. It just changes shape, the same way we do. I thought about how my life had turned into this quiet rhythm of preparing to leave, of saying invisible goodbyes to places and people who made me who I am. The idea of leaving Korea still didn't feel real. Every time I looked at my passport or packed a suitcase, I would stop halfway. There was always this tug part fear, part gratitude. Fear that I was walking away from the only version of myself the world knew. Gratitude that I was finally brave enough to imagine a new one. And yet, the hardest part wasn't about the move itself. It was about what I'd be leaving behind, the people, the memories, the sound of 7 voices harmonizing like we were one heartbeat. The night before our last group dinner, before my trip, Jimin called me. His voice was quiet, steady, but I could hear the heaviness underneath. "Do you really think you'll be happy there?" he asked. I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because happiness felt too small a word for what I was searching for. "I think I'll find peace," I said finally. He didn't reply right away. Then he whispered, "Peace sounds lonely." That sentence stayed in my chest for hours after we hung up. He was right. Peace can be lonely. Sometimes it's just silence, disguised as healing. Sometimes it's missing laughter you once took for granted. Sometimes it's realizing that even love has seasons, and not all of them are meant to bloom forever. But I also knew this. Peace isn't about running from noise. It's about creating harmony within it. That's what I wanted to find. When I arrived at the restaurant the next evening, the others were already there. Jin Hyung stood up first and hugged me so tight it almost felt like he was trying to keep time from moving forward. Hoseok was laughing, his energy trying to fill the room with warmth, even though I could see the sadness behind his eyes. Yoongi sat beside Namjoon, sipping quietly, his expression unreadable but soft. Taeyong waved his hand dramatically and said, "Don't make this too emotional, okay? We'll still see you again." But even as he joked, his voice cracked a little. We talked about everything that night. The old days, the late night rehearsals, the pranks, the meals that always turned into therapy sessions. There was laughter, and then there were moments when the silence was heavier than words. At one point, Jimin looked at me across the table and said, "Do you remember when you told me you'd never leave Korea because you didn't want to start over?" I nodded. He smiled faintly and added, "You're braver now." That broke me a little, because coming from him, those words meant the world. He's seen me at my weakest, the nights I couldn't sleep, the times I doubted myself, the days when I thought being perfect was the only way to deserve love. And now, he was the one giving me permission to grow. Maybe that's what love between brothers looks like, not holding each other back, but letting go with grace. After dinner, we walked by the river like we used to. The city lights shimmered on the water, and everything felt familiar yet fragile. Taeyong started humming one of our old songs under his breath, and slowly we all joined in. No instruments, no microphones, just voices blending into the night. For a few minutes, it felt like nothing had changed. But when the song ended, the silence that followed said everything it needed to. Yoongi handed me a small USB drive. "For when you miss the noise," he said. I smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. It was probably a mix of unreleased demos, fragments of us, little pieces of our world. Namjoon looked at me and said, "You're not leaving BTS. You're expanding it." That was such a Namjoon thing to say, turning goodbyes into poetry. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor, surrounded by memories, albums, clothes, photos, letters from fans. I picked up one letter from years ago that said, "Your music saved my life." I thought about how those words used to feel like a heavy responsibility, but now they felt like a shared journey. Because maybe music doesn't save lives, maybe it just reminds us we're not alone while we're trying to save ourselves. She called me later that night. She could tell I'd been crying, even though I hadn't said a word. "Did it hurt?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I admitted. It felt like saying goodbye to a part of myself. She paused and said, "Maybe it's not goodbye. Maybe it's just you making space for something new." Her voice was calm, grounding, the kind of tone that steadies storms. I realized then that she didn't want to replace my world. She wanted to help me carry it. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing small things that felt like signs: the smell of coffee, reminding me of studio mornings, the sound of laughter from strangers echoing our old jokes, the reflection of streetlights on puddles resembling stage lights. Life was still talking to me, just in a quieter language. Maybe leaving Korea wasn't about erasing my past. Maybe it was about learning how to listen again. The day my flight was confirmed, Jimin came to see me one last time. We didn't talk much. He just stood there staring at the half-packed suitcase. Then he walked up and hugged me tighter than he ever had before. "Don't forget to live," he said quietly. "Don't just survive out there." That's when I realized why he cried the first time I told him. It wasn't because he was losing me. It was because he knew I was finally choosing myself, and that kind of freedom always comes with grief. After he left, I sat by the window again, watching the rain start up once more. The city outside felt alive, chaotic, beautiful, heartbreaking. I whispered a quiet promise to it: I'll be back. Not as the same Jungkook, but as someone who has learned what love looks like when it's both holding on and letting go. That night, I wrote a lyric in my journal. "You can leave home, but home never leaves you." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The morning after Jimin left my apartment, I woke up feeling the kind of silence that hums beneath your rib. Not emptiness, just a pause. The kind that comes after a song ends and your heart is still catching up to what it heard. I sat there, half awake, replaying his words in my mind. "Don't just survive out there." They sounded simple, but they carried the weight of years, of friendship, of all the versions of ourselves that we'd built together. For a long time, my survival had depended on the rhythm of schedules, cameras, and applause. I didn't know who I was without it. But now I was starting to learn. When I stepped outside, the sky was clearer than usual. Seoul looked softer, almost forgiving. I walked past familiar streets, the same ones we used to sneak through after late night rehearsals, hiding under hoodies, laughing like we were invincible. Back then, the future was a blur of possibility. Now, it was a choice I'd already made. I thought about what it means to leave, not in the dramatic sense, but in the quiet, human one. It's not the flights or the packing that hurt. It's the realization that life keeps moving without you, and you can't press rewind. Later that day, I met with Namjoon at a small cafe near the Han River. He'd always been the anchor of the group, the calm in the chaos, the philosopher disguised as a friend. He was writing something in his notebook when I arrived. Without looking up, he said, "You know, leaving isn't betrayal. It's proof that you listen to your own voice." I smiled, but there was a lump in my throat. "I just don't want anyone to think I'm turning my back on them," I said. He finally looked at me and replied, "Real love doesn't chain you. It trusts you to return." We talked for hours about everything and nothing, the music we still wanted to make, the memories that defined us, the fear of being misunderstood. Before we parted, he said, "Write something when you get there. Not for us, for you. I promise I would. He smiled, and I realized that Namjoon's wisdom had always been the same message said in different ways. Keep growing. That evening, I went back to the studio one last time before the move. It was empty, but I could still feel the ghosts of our laughter there. Taeyoung teasing me over lyrics, Hoseok dancing until we forgot the time, Jin sneaking snacks like a mischievous older brother, Yoongi pretending not to care but recording every perfect take. I sat in the center of the room, closed my eyes, and imagined their voices overlapping 7 of us again, like time hadn't passed. Then I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." As I was leaving, the sound engineer handed me a small envelope. "Jimin asked me to give you this," he said. I opened it outside, under the streetlight. Inside was a photo of us during our debut year. Messy hair, tired eyes, pure joy. On the back in Jimin's handwriting were the words, "You taught me how to fly, now go learn how to land." I stood there for a long time, the photo trembling slightly in my hands. There's something sacred about being known that deeply when someone sees your flight and still reminds you of the ground. When I finally told her about everything, the group, the letter, the ache of leaving, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You know what I love most about you? You don't run from your past. You carry it like a song." And I realized she was right. Every chord, every melody, every tear I've shed with BTS was part of me. I wasn't leaving it behind. I was bringing it with me into this new life I was building. The night before my departure, all 6 of them came over unannounced. No schedule, no press, no pretense, just the 7 of us, sitting cross-legged on the floor, eating ramen and laughing until our stomachs hurt. It felt like the universe gave us one last moment of normalcy. At one point, Taeyoung pulled out his phone and said, "Let's take a picture before Jungkook becomes an American husband." Everyone laughed, even Jimin. The flash went off, freezing that fragile, perfect second, 7 faces, a little older, a little wiser, still bound by something that no time or distance could undo. When it was time for them to go, Jimin lingered by the door. He didn't say much, just looked at me and said, "You're still my brother, wherever you go." I nodded, unable to speak, because I knew that brotherhood didn't need geography. It lived in the spaces between every heartbeat we'd shared on stage, every note we sang in unison, every moment of silent understanding when words weren't enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the balcony and looked at the Seoul skyline glowing under the stars. I whispered goodbye to the city, to the boy who'd grown up here, to the dream that had carried me this far. And then, quietly, I promised something to myself. I'll make this next chapter worthy of the love that built me. Maybe that's what growing really means. Not forgetting who you were, but honoring it by becoming who you're meant to be. BTS will always be my beginning, my heartbeat, my home. But now I'm ready to find out what love looks like when the lights fade and the world goes quiet, when it's just me, her, and the sound of rain reminding me that even silence has a rhythm worth listening to. The morning of my flight, the air in Seoul felt different, heavier, like the city itself knew I was about to leave. I woke up before dawn, long before the alarm. The apartment was still filled with half-packed boxes and quiet memories. My suitcase sat open beside the couch, waiting for the last few things. A jacket from our tour, the bracelet Army gave me, and that photo Jimin slipped into my bag the night before. I stood there for a long time, holding it in my hand, tracing the faded edges of our smiles. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a promise I'd carry wherever I went. I brewed coffee and sat on the floor, watching the sky shift from black to gray to gold. The first light touched the rooftops like it was trying to bless the city. I thought about all the mornings we'd seen together, rehearsing before sunrise, laughing, half asleep in studios, rushing to airports with heavy eyes and hopeful hearts. Every day of my youth was spent chasing something invisible. Perfection, meaning recognition. And now, as I prepared to leave, I realized what I had been chasing all along was peace. Not applause, not validation, just peace. The knock on the door startled me. It was Taeyoung. He'd always been early for goodbyes. He didn't say much when I opened the door. He just handed me a small box. Inside was a harmonica, the same one he used to play during late night breaks when we were exhausted but didn't want to stop creating. For when it gets too quiet, he said. His voice was steady, but I could see his eyes were wet. Play this and think of us. I hugged him, harder than I meant to, because words were too small for what I felt. After he left, Hoseok texted. It was simple. You're brave. Remember that. Jin sent a photo of us from years ago with the caption, "Don't get too skinny there." Yoongi sent me a voice note, just piano music, slow and bittersweet. And Namjoon, as always, wrote a message that hit deeper than he probably knew. When you land, don't try to find home. Build it. Then came Jimin. He didn't knock. He just walked in, like he used to back in the dorm days, like nothing had changed. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. We stood there for a second, just staring at each other. Then he said, "You're really doing it." I nodded. Yeah. He smiled, but his eyes gave him away. "I guess this is what growing up feels like," he said softly. You start realizing that home isn't always a place, it's the people who made you feel seen. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat together, drinking coffee in silence. Every once in a while, he'd glance at me, like he was memorizing my face. I wanted to tell him that this wasn't goodbye, that the bond we had wasn't something distance could erase. But I also knew that saying it out loud might make it hurt more. So instead, I said, "When you miss me, just play our songs. I'll be singing them too." He laughed quietly. "You better," he said. When it was finally time to leave for the airport, he insisted on coming with me. The car ride was quiet, the city still half asleep outside the window. Every street we passed carried a memory. I remembered us running through these same roads years ago, laughing under the rain, chasing dreams we didn't fully understand. Now those same roads were carrying me towards something unknown. At the terminal, Jimin helped me with my luggage, even though I told him not to. Typical Jimin, always needing to take care of someone else. When it was time to say goodbye, he just pulled me into a hug. No words, no jokes, no tears, just a long, quiet embrace that said everything. When he finally let go, he said, "You're going to be amazing. Just don't forget us when you find that peace you've been looking for." I looked him in the eye and said, "I couldn't forget you even if I tried." As I walked away toward the gate, I didn't look back right away. I didn't want to see him standing there. I wanted to remember him the way he looked when we first met, full of laughter, full of life, full of belief in what we could be. But just before I turned the corner, I glanced back. He was still there, hands in his pockets, head slightly bowed, smiling through tears. That image burned itself into me. The flight was long, and I didn't sleep. Somewhere above the clouds, I replayed every conversation from the past few weeks. Namjoon's quiet encouragement, Taeyoung's gift, Yoongi's melody, Hoseok's laughter, Jin's teasing, Jimin's silence. Every piece of them was stitched into me like a heartbeat. I realized I wasn't leaving BTS behind. I was carrying them into a new chapter. They weren't just my past, they were my foundation. When the plane began to descend, I looked out the window at a new city below. Vast, unfamiliar, beautiful. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. I thought about what Jimin said, that peace sounds lonely, and smiled to myself. Maybe peace is quiet, but maybe, just maybe, that's what makes it sacred. After landing, I stepped out into the foreign air. Everything smelled different, the trees, the sky, the rhythm of footsteps around me, but when I took my first breath, it didn't feel like I was starting over. It felt like I was continuing the same story, just a new verse. I took out the harmonica Taeyoung gave me and played a few notes. They were shaky, clumsy, but they carried warmth. People turned to look, some smiling, some curious. I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. That night, I unpacked my things in the small apartment. I'd chosen nothing fancy, just quiet. I placed the photo of us on the desk, right next to the window. The moonlight hit it perfectly, and for a moment, I could almost hear their laughter again. I whispered, I made it, not as a declaration, but as a prayer. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but I knew this. I wasn't escaping. I was expanding. I wasn't leaving love behind. I was giving it space to grow. And somewhere across the ocean, I knew 6 brothers were looking at the same moon, smiling, knowing that no matter the distance, the bond that built us was stronger than time, stronger than fame, stronger than fear. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like Jungkook the idol. I felt like Jungkook the man, finally free, finally at peace, finally home in the heart of everywhere. The first few weeks in the new country felt like walking through someone else's dream. Everything was softer here. The light, the air, the way time moved. I'd wake up to birds I didn't recognize, make coffee in silence, and stand by the window watching people rush to work, not one of them knowing who I was. It was strange, liberating, and a little sad. For the first time since I was a teenager, I could walk down a street without anyone turning their head. I could sit in a cafe without whispers, without eyes following my every move. I thought freedom would feel louder, more exciting, but it was quiet, almost painfully so. Some nights, I missed the noise. The late studio sessions, the laughter, the warmth of familiar chaos. I missed the boys, the staff, even the exhaustion that came with always being somewhere, doing something. Here, everything moved differently. Time stretched. My phone didn't buzz as often. Messages from the members came in at odd hours, scattered across time zones. Jin would send pictures of food with a "wish you were here." Hosok sent random videos of him dancing in the practice room. Yoongi sent snippets of music without context, sometimes slow, sometimes haunting. Namjoon wrote poems instead of texts. Of course, Taehyung sent photos of sunsets with no caption, like he wanted me to fill in the meaning. And Jimin, he didn't text much, just a few words now and then. You good? Or sleep well. But somehow, those 2 words always hit the hardest. I knew what he wasn't saying. I knew he missed me. I missed him too. But I didn't want to make him carry my loneliness on top of his own. I started spending weekends volunteering at a community center nearby. It wasn't anything big, helping out at youth workshops, cleaning up local parks, teaching kids a little music. It reminded me of the food bank where I met her, the woman who had quietly turned my life upside down. She was here with me now, and watching her work with the children made me understand something I'd forgotten in all the noise of my old life. Purpose doesn't always have to be global. Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it's just about showing up for one person at a time. She'd smile at me across the room, that calm smile that had once disarmed me completely. One day, while we were walking home from the center, she said, "You look different lately." I laughed. "Different how?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "More present, more like yourself." Her words made me think of what she said months ago, practice being the person you hope to become. Maybe that's what I was doing now, every day, without even realizing it. Practicing being someone who could live quietly, who could love deeply, who didn't need the world's approval to feel alive. At night, I'd play the harmonica Taehyung gave me, softly, by the window. The sound was raw, uneven, imperfect, but it felt real. It reminded me that imperfection could still be beautiful, that music wasn't just about performance, it was about presence. Sometimes I'd record those little melodies and send them to Yoongi. He'd always reply with just one word, "Nice." But I knew what he meant. He understood silence better than anyone. One night, Jimin called unexpectedly. It was late where he was, morning where I was. His voice sounded tired but warm. "I saw the moon tonight," he said. "It looked like the one we used to see from the dorm rooftop." I smiled. "It's the same one, Jimin, just a different sky." He laughed softly, that kind of laugh that breaks and heals you at the same time. Then he said, "It's weird. Even when you're far away, it feels like you're still here." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I felt the same. The distance didn't erase him. If anything, it made him louder in my heart. Every small victory, every quiet evening, every new song idea I thought of him. Not in the way people assume, but in the way you think of someone who understands your soul before you have to explain it. After that call, I sat on the balcony until sunrise. The world was quiet, but my heart wasn't. I realized I wasn't running from home. I was rediscovering it in new shapes. The ocean that separated us wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. It reminded me that love, friendship, brotherhood, they don't shrink with distance. They evolve. A few weeks later, Namjoon called to tell me they were planning something special. A surprise, he said. He wouldn't tell me what it was, but I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Just promise me you'll watch the live stream next weekend," he said. I agreed, curious but unsuspect. When that weekend came, I opened the link he sent me. The screen went black for a few seconds. Then the familiar BTS logo appeared. The music started. It was a new song, a slow, reflective ballad. My chest tightened as soon as I heard the lyrics. It was about distance, about staying connected, about how love doesn't fade. It just finds new ways to speak. I recognized Jimin's voice first, then Taehyung, then mine. They'd used one of my old unreleased recordings from a demo I'd made before leaving. The chorus hit, and I realized what they'd done. They'd built the song around me, around us. It wasn't just a performance, it was a letter, a bridge in melody form. I sat there crying before I even realized I was. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness, but from being seen, from being remembered, from knowing that no matter how far I went, I'd always be part of something bigger than myself. That night, I sent a message to our group chat. "Heard the song. You guys are cruel." Taehyung replied first. "We're just keeping your mic warm." Jimin added a heart emoji and then another. Namjoon wrote, "You're still with us, Jungkook. Always." I didn't reply right away. I just sat there listening to the song on repeat, letting it fill every corner of the room. I looked out at the city lights below and whispered, "Thank you." That's when it hit me. Leaving home doesn't mean losing it. Sometimes home follows you in the form of voices that never stop singing your name. And even across oceans, those harmonies never fade. The next few months unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a book I didn't realize I was writing. The city began to feel familiar, the sound of the buses in the morning, the smell of bread from the bakery downstairs, the quiet chatter of strangers whose language I was starting to understand without translation. I'd found a rhythm here, not as an idol, but as a person. No one called me Jungkook from BTS anymore. They just called me Jungkook. And for the first time, that was enough. But there were days when the silence pressed too hard against my chest. Days when I missed the sound of laughter echoing through practice rooms, the adrenaline before concerts, the chaos of 7 voices blending into something holy. Fame had been overwhelming, but it also made me feel alive in a way peace sometimes didn't. There is a strange ache that comes when you finally get everything you ask for: stillness, freedom, anonymity, and realize you missed the noise. One evening, I got a package from Korea. The handwriting on the box was unmistakable. Jimin's. Inside was a Polaroid photo of all 7 of us from our last dinner together, taped to a note that simply said, "You still belong to us." Underneath the note was something else, a small black notebook. On the first page in Namjoon's handwriting, it said, "For your thoughts, don't write lyrics, write life." The rest of the pages were blank, waiting. That night, I sat by the window, opened to a blank page, and began writing. Not songs, not poetry, just thoughts, memories, fears. The truth I didn't say out loud. I wrote about what it felt like to start over at 20-something with a lifetime behind me, about walking into grocery stores unnoticed, about learning to find meaning in quiet gestures instead of applause, about how sometimes I still heard Jimin's laugh in my head when I was cooking. Writing became my way of talking to them, a silent conversation that didn't need replies. Weeks passed. The seasons began to change. She and I started planning our future, not as headlines, but as human beings. We talked about marriage, about maybe starting a small family, about the kind of life that doesn't demand performance to be meaningful. She asked once, "Do you miss it, the fame, the stage?" I thought about it for a while and said, "I miss the connection, not the spotlight, just the feeling of being part of something bigger than myself." She smiled and said, "Then find new ways to connect." That conversation stayed with me. I started teaching music to kids at the community center. At first, I thought it would be simple, just chords and rhythm, but they reminded me of why I fell in love with music in the first place. They didn't care about fame or perfection. They just wanted to express something real. When one of them played their first full song, out of tune but full of heart, I felt something inside me loosen. It was the same feeling I used to get when ARMY sang back our lyrics louder than we did. The reminder that music isn't about being flawless, it's about being felt. One afternoon, while class was ending, I noticed one of the older kids sitting alone. His guitar string had snapped, and he looked frustrated. I sat next to him and helped replace it, showing him how to tighten it slowly. He asked, "How do you know so much?" I smiled. "Because once upon a time, I broke more strings than I can count." He grinned, not realizing how true that was, not just about music, but about life. Later that week, I sent a voice note to Yoongi with one of the melodies we'd written in class. He replied a few hours later with a short message. "You're healing, aren't you?" I didn't even have to answer. He already knew. Taeyoung started FaceTiming me more often, mostly at random hours. He'd show me the songs he was writing or the outfits he was trying for a photo shoot. He'd laugh and say, "You should come visit. It's too quiet without you." And I'd laugh back, saying, "You just miss stealing my snacks." But under those jokes was truth. We both missed the rhythm we once had. One night, while scrolling through messages, I saw Jimin's name light up. He sent a photo of the moon again. No words. Just the same sky we'd shared 1,000 times before. I took a picture of my own view, the moon hanging above a foreign skyline, and sent it back. For a long time, there was no reply. Then, finally, he wrote, "Same moon, different heartbeats, still connected." That message undid me. I sat there crying quietly, realizing that the universe had found a way to keep us tied together no matter the miles between us. Love, whether brotherly, romantic, or spiritual, doesn't fade when you move away. It just changes form. A few weeks later, I woke up to a message from Namjoon. "Check the news," he said. Half asleep, I opened my phone and there it was. BTS had just announced a surprise song drop. The title made me freeze. "Home is You." I pressed play. The melody started with a single voice line. The same demo I'd recorded months before leaving. They'd finished it, they'd turned my half-whispered idea into something complete. As I listened, I realized they weren't just singing to fans. They were singing to me, to us. Every lyric was a letter. "You carried our dreams across the ocean, but our hearts still walk beside you." By the time the bridge hit, Jimin's voice breaking slightly on the line, "You can leave, but love won't let you go." I couldn't hold it anymore. The tears came heavy and pure. I sent them a message right after, "You made me cry, you jerks." Hoseok replied first with laughing emojis. Namjoon wrote, "Then we did it right." Jimin just said, "Now you know what we felt." That night I lay awake, headphones on, listening to that song over and over. It didn't sound like goodbye, it sounded like continuation, like a thread stretching across oceans, invisible but unbreakable. I looked over at her. She was asleep beside me, peaceful, her hand resting against my arm. In that moment, everything made sense. Leaving Korea hadn't been about abandoning anything. It was about expanding love, letting it breathe across borders, across languages, across the spaces between who I was and who I was becoming. I closed my eyes, whispering to the night, Thank you for letting me go. And thank you for not letting me drift too far. Because even here, thousands of miles away, I could still hear their voices like a heartbeat beneath the quiet. And that was enough. The season shifted again. And with them, my understanding of what it means to belong. The trees outside my apartment turned gold, then bare. The air grew colder, but not in a lonely way. More like the calm that comes when life finally learns how to breathe. I had built something here. Mornings with her, evenings at the community center, weekends spent exploring unfamiliar streets that no longer felt foreign. People here didn't know my past, and somehow that made me more honest. I wasn't living as the world expected Jungkook to be. I was just being. But even peace has echoes. Some nights, I'd wake up from dreams where the stage lights still burned against my skin. I'd hear Jimin's voice singing next to mine. The roar of army-like thunder, the warmth of our synchronized heartbeats. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the others ever dreamed of it too, the feeling of being unstoppable together. Then guilt would creep in. Was I selfish for leaving that behind? Or brave for letting it go? I told her once, during one of those sleepless nights, sometimes I feel like I left a part of myself back there. She reached for my hand and said, maybe you didn't leave it. Maybe you just planted it. Things can grow even when you're not watching. That line stayed with me. It turned the ache into something gentler. Weeks later, I got a message from Namjoon. We're thinking about doing a reunion show next year. Would you come? I stared at the screen for a long time. My chest tightened, half with excitement, half with fear. Could I go back without losing the balance I'd built? Could I stand under those lights again without forgetting why I'd left? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "You can return without reversing." The next day, I called Jimin. When he answered, I didn't even say hello. I just asked, would it be weird if I came back? He laughed, that same laugh that still felt like home. Weird? It would be, right? Then softer. You were never really gone, Jungkook. We just missed your noise. So I said yes. When I landed in Korea months later, the air hit me like memory. Everything smelled the same. The coffee stands, the rain-soaked concrete, the heartbeat of the city that raised me. I went straight from the airport to the studio. The others were already there, pretending not to wait. The moment I walked in, Hosok yelled, "Look who decided to come home!" Taeyoung ran up and hugged me so hard I almost dropped my bag. Yoongi just nodded with that half smile that said everything. Jin wiped his eyes dramatically. Namjoon handed me coffee, the same brand he'd always bought. And then there was Jimin standing a few steps back, smiling like he was trying not to cry. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and I walked straight into them. The years between us disappeared in an instant. It felt like no time had passed at all. We spent the night talking, laughing, reminiscing. Yoongi played new beats he'd been working on. Taeyoung showed me a half-finished song. Jimin sang quietly, almost shyly, and I joined in without thinking. For a moment, we weren't 7 men with different lives. We were just 7 boys again, singing about dreams too big for the world to understand. Later, when everyone else had gone home, Jimin and I stayed behind. We sat on the studio floor, surrounded by cables and empty coffee cups. He looked at me and said, "So, are you happy?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "Yeah, but it's a different kind of happy. Quieter, truer." He nodded like he already knew. "Then don't lose it," he said. "Even when you're with us again, keep that peace. We'll learn from it too." His words felt like a blessing. It made me realize that coming back didn't mean returning to the old me. It meant sharing what I'd found. Balance, stillness, clarity. Maybe that's what life is, collecting pieces of yourself in different places and learning how to weave them together. The reunion show was set for spring. When I stepped on stage again, the lights didn't blind me this time. They felt warm, familiar, like a sunrise. The crowd's roar hit a wave of love that nearly knocked the breath out of me. I looked around at Namjoon, steady as ever. Yoongi, focused but smiling. Hoseok, radiating joy. Taeyoung, eyes bright with mischief. Jin, proud like a father. And Jimin, standing beside me, hand gripping the mic, tears glinting under the lights. As the music started, everything fell into place. The years apart, the choices, the pain, the distance, all of it had been leading here. When I sang my first line, I wasn't the same person who'd left. I was the person who'd found peace and brought it home. After the show, as we stood backstage, exhausted but alive, Jimin came up to me again. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't need to. He just whispered, "You didn't leave Korea. You brought it with you." I smiled because he was right. Home isn't a place you return to. It's something you carry, something that grows with you no matter how far you go. That night, as I looked out over Seoul glittering under the stars, I thought about every version of me, the boy who wanted to be seen, the man who needed to disappear, and the one standing here now, finally whole. And I realized something I'd been too afraid to say before. Leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the bridge that led me back to myself. The night after the reunion concert, I couldn't sleep.